Welcome to the new Chemist podcast, one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We are glad you are listening. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the new Chemist podcast. We are glad you are listening. We are one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the new Chemist podcast.
We are so glad you are listening. Feel free to subscribe on Spotify and tell your friends and colleagues about the podcast.
Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. You are very important, especially to us here at the New Chemist podcasting group. You listening in is significant.
Vous êtes très important, surtout pour nous ici au New Chemist Podcasting Group. Votre écoute est significative.
Usted es muy importante, especialmente para nosotros aquí en The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Usted escuchando, es significativo.
Você é muito importante. Especialmente para nós do The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Você ouvindo, é significativo.
Είστε πολύ σημαντικοί, ειδικά για εμάς εδώ στο The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Το να ακούς είναι σημαντικό.
Sie sind sehr wichtig, besonders für uns hier bei The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Es ist wichtig, dass du zuhörst.
Je bent erg belangrijk, vooral voor ons hier bij The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Dat je meeluistert, is veelbetekenend.
You are very important, especially to us here the New Chemist podcasting group. You listening in is significant. Welcome to the New Chemist podcast.
Bienvenidos al podcast del nuevo químico.
Καλώς ήρθατε στο podcast του New Chemist. Welkom bij de podcast van The New Chemist.
Bienvenue sur le podcast du nouveau chimiste.
Bem-vindo ao podcast do novo químico.
Welcome to the New Chemist podcast. Work hard. Be value driven. You can do it. You can grow and learn it. You can be the difference you and your community needs. Don't give up. We are here, rooting and cheering for you. Don't give up.
Travaillez dur. Soyez axés sur la valeur. Tu peux le faire. Vous pouvez grandir et l'apprendre. Vous pouvez être la différence dont vous et votre communauté avez besoin. N'abandonnez pas. Nous sommes ici pour vous encourager et vous encourager. N'abandonnez pas.
Trabalhar duro. Seja orientado por valores. Você consegue. Você pode crescer e aprender. Você pode ser a diferença que você e sua comunidade precisam. Não desista. Estamos aqui torcendo e torcendo por você. Não desista.
Δούλεψε σκληρά. Να οδηγείτε στην αξία. Μπορείς να το κάνεις. Μπορείτε να μεγαλώσετε και να το μάθετε. Μπορείτε να είστε η διαφορά που χρειάζεστε εσείς και η κοινότητά σας. Μην τα παρατάς. Είμαστε εδώ για να σας ζητοκραυγάσουμε. Μην τα παρατάς.
Trabaja duro. Sea impulsado por el valor. Puedes hacerlo. Puedes crecer y aprenderlo. Usted puede ser la diferencia que usted y su comunidad necesitan. No te rindas, estamos aquí animándote y animándote. No te rindas.
Werk hard. Wees waardegedreven. Je kunt het. Je kunt groeien en leren. U kunt het verschil zijn dat u en uw gemeenschap nodig hebben. Geef niet op. We zijn hier om voor je te roten en te juichen. Geef niet op.
Work hard. Be value driven. You can do it. You can grow and learn it. You can be the difference you and your community needs. Don't give up. We are here rooting and cheering for you. Don't give up. Thanks for listening. We're glad you were able to tune into this podcast. Once again, this is the New Chemist, where we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as the other sciences, careers, community, research, and COVID-19. Thanks again for listening. Note: The views on this podcast represent those of my guests and I.
In the world of pharmacy, we lay the claim. Knowledge and compassion is the golden flame. Science and practice, side by side they groove. In a student's journey, we find the move.
Welcome to the New Chemist's podcast. We are glad you are listening. We are one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the New Chemist's podcast. We are glad you are listening. We are one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Thinking by W.D. Wintle. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win, but you think you can't, it is almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. For out in this world we find, success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win the prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. Remember, strategy, hard work, collaboration, and execution. You can do it. You can do it.
Okay, welcome to the New Chemist podcast. It is so good to have you listening today. Here on the New Chemist podcast, we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as careers, community research, successful student stories, and much more. My guest today is Simar Bajaj. Thanks for joining me today. It is so good to hear from you. Just briefly, I'll inform my audience about you. So Simar is currently a student at Harvard University. A very, very ambitious young man, very hardworking. So I'll just give you some quick snippets, snapshots of his work so far. He has a part of Phi Beta Kappa, a National Student Leadership Foundation Scholar, Editor-in-Chief of Synthesis, President of the World Pre-Health Conference, Student Academic Integrity Fellow, Harvard College Honor Council. He has served as former chair for the Kennedy School Institute of Politics Health Policy Initiative, a John Harvard Scholar. He also served, so some of his experiences include serving as a research and policy intern at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. He's also served as a Washington, D.C. reporter for STAT, a teaching fellow and research fellow at Stanford, a founder and host of That Medic Network, and a research fellow at Mass General Hospital. He is definitely very accomplished. He has been named 40 under 40 in cancer. He's also been named, he also is or has served as a journalist in The Atlantic, Time Magazine, Washington Post, Guardian, NPR. He has been a lead author and worked in the New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, Nature Medicine, and the British Medical Journal. Wow. So yes, Simar, it's definitely a treat to have you on this podcast today. You have done a lot of work and you earned your stripes. You're earning your stripes. So thank you again for joining me. So as we get started, what have been your long-standing interest in the field of science and communication?
Yeah, no, thanks, David, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've been interested in science and medicine for the longest time, ever since I was 9, really, and sort of interested in healthcare, health equity specifically, and sort of this notion of medicine as treating everyone equally because it's the patient in front of you. Of course, the reality of medicine is much more complicated and nuanced, and that came with time. But I think it's reinforced in me a couple things. One is that there is sort of the power of medicine to heal, right? I mean, that is essentially the function, and it's a beautiful function. I don't think there's many professions where you have that opportunity to serve your fellow human being, fellow man, fellow woman in that way. And second, it sort of emphasizes to me the rift between science and the public. I think as researchers, both of us, we know very well how to communicate to other researchers. We do that through journal articles. We do that through conferences, and we can get very good at that. But I think what's more challenging, but potentially more important, is communicating with patients, communicating with the lay public. And that's sort of where my interest in science communication came in. I started off doing research since about 2018, 2019, and then growing increasingly interested in how can I make this research more translatable, more actionable for the public. And I think that sort of started my interest in journalism, and which I started only last year in summer 2022.
Are you serious? You started this last year and you've made all the strides? So I look forward to seeing your journey as you progress. So what has been the toolkit that you've used?
Yeah, no, I think it's an important question. And I think it comes down to a couple things. One is that if you're going to write for the public, if you're going to write for sort of this science journalism places, you want to have an eye for important questions, right? You want to be able to see sort of what are questions that matter to people. What do people care about? What do they want to know about? I'll give you an example. Over the summer, I wrote a piece on malaria. Malaria in Florida and Texas. There was these recent 5 cases of locally transmitted malaria across states. And it was something people were worried about, right? So the piece I wrote was a simple explainer, trying to understand what this means, why people shouldn't necessarily worry, but what precautions they could take. And it was, enormously well read, right? Because it spoke to what people cared about, what mattered to them, right? So one thing is you want to make sure that you have an eye for important questions and you're able to write about it in a way that's clear and compelling. That's the second thing, right? Being able to write about it in a way that's clear and compelling. Because you can write about the greatest idea, but if it doesn't mean much to the average person, right, then it's no good to anyone. So all that is to say is I think those are 2 really important toolkits, right? Eye for important questions, writing about things in a clear and compelling way. And I think there's also just grit that comes as the third part.
Of course.
Because I said I started in summer 2022. I started off doing freelance journals. Why did I do freelance? Because every journalism internship I applied for rejected me. So freelance was the last resort, right? Doing it on my own. And it meant that I was sending, over that one summer, I was sending probably 500 to 1,000 cold emails, right, to different editors, trying to get them to listen to what I had to say, get them to give me a chance, right?
That's very good, dude.
So I think it takes that sort of willingness to push forward through rejection after rejection, after no response, because you only need one yes, and then one becomes 2 and 2 and 3 and so on.
Yeah, I agree. You need to get your foot in the door. That's very commendable, dude. Over 500, you said 500 to 1,000 cold emails?
Yeah.
Dude, that's interesting, dude. Because I wouldn't say I sent like 500 to 1,000 cold emails, but that same approach to being very tenacious, I employed the same thing. When I was at Georgia Tech and I tried to get a research position, given that I was new to Georgia Tech, as well as in other places as well, but specifically in Georgia Tech, this is where I employed that same thing. At Georgia Tech, I sent emails to professors, and dude, I was really passionate, really passionate about research. I mean, like I would read their papers and then start telling them what I think they could do, all the possibilities and future potentials associated with their cancer research and nanomedicine research and all that other jazz. But this is the thing, didn't really get that many positions. Didn't get any positions actually initially. However, the one position I got made the world of a difference because it allowed me to integrate and also meet with faculty who I otherwise would not have met through the summer undergraduate research experience in the College of Engineering. So yeah, dude, that's very commendable. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture in your career and in your life in general? You speak about having to be tenacious, push past rejection. What motivating factor was in your mind? Did you have a community of support, or did you have a lot of mentors who just reminded you this thing happens? How did you push through that rejection and keep in sight the big picture that allowed you to progress to where you are now?
Right. I mean, it goes to the core of why I do journalism, right? And I think it comes down to 2 factors, the big and the small, to put it simply. right? The small is the patient, right? The patient in front of you, right? The one-to-one interactions you have, right? And sort of the tragic stories you hear, but also the hope that you hear, right? I spoke to a patient this summer who travels 5.5 hours one way to get to her doctor's appointment, right? So 11 hours round trip, right? And she lives in this incredibly rural community in Colorado. And it's so inspiring to hear that, but also so tragic. And it reinforces the rural disparities. It reinforces this patient has obesity and she was going to see her obesity medicine physician. Reinforces how valuable sort of medical care is for these patients, right? And that's what motivates me, right, to push back rejection. That I have this story in front of me. I have this patient who has trusted me with their narrative, something that, frankly, is not easy to share, right? And I feel not only in sort of a responsibility to justify their narrative, but also to push past. How can I give up when I'm carrying such a valuable piece of someone's life? So I think that's a small, and I don't mean that in that it's small important. I mean that it's a one-to-one relationship. Then the big is sort of, what is the cultural implication? What is the purpose of this? So on this story was on the shortage of obesity medicine physicians in the country. What's the big picture? The big picture is that we do a terrible job of treating obesity in the United States. Only 1% of patients get medication treatment. And we just simply do not treat it as a disease. We think of obesity as a moral failing, wrongly so. So it ultimately becomes like, if we have such a drastic misunderstanding, this is such a big problem, right? 50% of Americans will have obesity by 2030. So the big picture is that I have to be doing something to set the narrative in a more positive, productive, less stigmatizing direction. So I'm motivated by that too, right? I think it's sort of these dueling factors, not dueling, complementary, that keep me motivated even when you hear rejection after rejection, because there's a patient on the other hand, and there's a social ill that again, not many people are paying attention to. So I think that's what motivates me when it was quite easy to just step aside and give up.
Wow, that's very good, man. It's very good. So the value in the story, as well as the benefit of you pursuing the story, is basically what kept you going after you pushed, even when you experienced rejection. So that's very good. So how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of science communication? So when you write your articles, is it your perspective that you think is complementing to you being creative, or how is it in the approach to the information? What is it that you bring to the table that allows you to have such success the success that you've had to date? What is it the creativity? What is it that's driving it?
I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I appreciate sort of you calling it success. I mean, it's all I appreciate that. But I think the first thing is sort of having a wide eye, and I'll tell you what I mean. Just sort of looking at across different disciplines, right? I've written about everything from lung cancer screening to sepsis machine learning, to pig heart transplants, to bladder cancer surgery recovery, right? And there's benefits to having sort of this wide eye. You get to learn a lot about different fields, and you get to draw implicit connections that make your insights more valuable, more tangible. I think there's also something to be said about just writing in a compelling narrative way, right? I mean, as humans, we reach out for narratives, right? When there's a narrative around us, it's instinctive. And I think it's this field of creative nonfiction that I think is really worth knowing about, worth emphasizing. Right? Creative nonfiction is the idea of using fiction techniques, right? So fiction techniques, what is that? Like setting a scene, right? Character building, right? Drama. And using that in a nonfiction sense, right? Because again, those are the things we cling to as humans, right? And when you're going to be writing about something as potentially archaic or as potentially just intangible, like pig heart transplants, right? I mean, you and I, like, we have never seen a pig heart transplant. It's hard to even imagine that, right? But if you write about it in a way that's compelling and interesting and creative, right, you draw people in and you can teach them something or two about the science, something or two about the history, something or two about the ethics.
Okay, so that's good. It's very good. So how have you sought or found the right environment for you to thrive scientifically and intellectually? So you're now at Harvard. You're at Harvard studying for undergrad. How was the process to getting there? What can you give us some insight into the story to getting there? What did you have to overcome? What did you have to do? What did you have to pursue? What did you have to not do?
Right.
Give or take.
The Harvard admissions process is its own black box, right? Of sorts. Right. So I don't have so much insight into what I did, especially to get in there. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's just like my philosophy to life is sort of putting 100% in everything you do, right? And what does that mean, right? It means when I'm sort of doing this podcast with you, I'm gonna put 100% of myself into it, right?
Oh yes.
Sort of writing an article for, let's say, Stat News, I'm gonna put 100% into that. When I'm with my friends, right, and just chatting over dinner, I'm gonna put myself 100% into that, right? All that is to say is that I think each of these things are personally meaningful to me, and I want to make the most of it. And I think sort of that's a generally potentially a good philosophy in life. At least I like to think so. And I think that perhaps that was why, right, that helped me get here. But I think more generally, it's just being willing to try new things, right? Being willing to experiment, being willing to test oneself in different ways. I mean, journalism is the prime example of that, right? If you told me 4 years ago, right, that, or even frankly 2 years ago, that I was going to be a journalist, right, or I was going to at least be writing for popular press outlets, I would not believe you. I would have in fact laughed at you, right? Not because I think any less of journalism, but because I couldn't imagine myself being able to do that, right? I just it was totally out of the realm of possibility. But here I am today, and that was simply because I tried. And not everything you try is going to be successful. This is sort of the nice exception, but it teaches you something about yourself. It teaches you something about your interests.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the thing I hear echoing, like almost like an undertone that's kind of effervescing, if you will, from this conversation, is the ability to be resilient. Yeah, being resilient. And this is the thing, resiliency, or the capacity to be resilient, is almost like a toolkit, if you will. Because when you become, or you gain the capacity to be resilient, and you learn the strategies that you need to push through adversity, you carry that skill with you to the next situation, or next accomplishment, or next challenge. Yeah, dude, I could relate to you relate to your story in a lot of ways, in that, when I started undergrad, I didn't picture where I would be right now. I did not know. The path to getting to where you are is, at least for me, it wasn't linear. It wasn't linear by any stretch of the imagination. But it's enjoyable when you see the fruits of your hard work. So what would you say has been one of your most effective and impactful pieces, or ideas, or practices, or projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's a couple of different answers I could give you. I could give you sort of the piece I wrote on pig heart transplants for The Guardian that has won several awards. I could tell you sort of a piece I wrote on sepsis machine learning, right? That came after my grandfather died of sepsis, and I wanted to find some way to understand his condition and process it myself, and that came through the article. But the one I'll tell you for now is sort of the articles I've written on obesity for Stat News. I sort of mentioned one earlier, and I've written others on sort of what is sort of the future bariatric surgery, right, which is weight loss surgery, or as it's commonly known. I've written another one on sort of what my doctors do, given that these new weight loss drugs seem to have some protection of the heart. They help protect the heart and against major cardiovascular events. And I think the reason why those are so personally meaningful to me, and I hope impactful, is that, again, we're sort of dealing with these enormous stigma against patients with obesity, right? These people that are, frankly, I mean, some of them who are just trying to find treatment, just trying to find dignity and respect in our society. And the power of journalism, to me, is not just in telling stories, right? We can tell stories in the campfire, right? And that's valuable, but it's not just in telling stories, it's in the opportunity to change culture. It's in the opportunity to shift policy. I'll give you a couple of examples of that, right? For example, I wrote a piece in March on smoking and sort of how this one town in the US is banning anyone born after January 1st, 2000 from buying cigarettes in the town, right? It's a really interesting law, potentially a way to phase out, grandfather out cigarettes. And just 2 or 3 days ago, the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced that they're going to implement a similar law in the country, right? I had written this piece in The Guardian, right, a major British newspaper. It's possible that one of his sort of cabinet members or Prime Minister Sunak read it himself, and maybe that influenced his decision. So I think journalism is, there's 2 lessons from that anecdote. One is that a lot of journalism is just throwing things out into the ether, right? I will never know, frankly, if Prime Minister Sunak read my article, right? It's possible. Maybe meet him. But unless I mean, I so. But I think I don't need to know. I think the emphasis is I don't need to know, right? Okay. I've spread my information in a wide audience, read by hundreds of thousands of people, right? And I have faith that it will influence policy, and I've taken the steps to try to put it into the hands of policymakers, sending it, emailing it to people in the UK, people in Australia, other people who are considering this law. So all that is to say is that it's sort of the benefit of that one-on-one approach that a doctor might take, right? Where you're able to really help a patient, you're really able to touch their life in a meaningful way. And the benefit of the journalistic approach, where maybe you won't have as sort of personal a connection, right? Or as sort of immediate of an impact, but you have much more scale. And I think you need to do both.
Wow, dude, this is very good. Very, very good. Like your persistence in that you email it directly to the people. That's good, man. This is good. Yeah, that's very good. So, how do you maintain a balanced life given all your responsibilities and accomplishments? So, what practices have you implemented as a student? You said you're a senior, right? Correct? Senior? Yeah. So you're a senior at Harvard. How do you maintain balance? How do you make time for the fun, the hard work, the future goals, and still keep a smile? How do you do all of that? Smile is important. You can do all three and not have a smile.
That's
smile
true.
is important.
There's so many people who work hard but they have trouble being happy.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to something I was saying earlier about that 100%, right? And I really try to bring 100% to everything I do, right? And I don't do it the obvious question is then, Simar, when do you have time for yourself? And I think for me, the work that I do, I've deliberately selected it. I've deliberately chosen it because it energizes me. It's meaningful to me, right? In a way that is hard to quantify, right? Where other people might be tired or exhausted by the work. I feel even more energy, right? I'm doing some of these things, right? Because I think, again, it comes back to big and small, right? I have sort of a very clear understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing and what the purpose is. And that is motivating. Now, it means that sometimes I have to make a sort of sacrifice. I have to decide whether I'm going to do X or Y. I frankly can't do it all, right? And I don't propose that I can. So the question then becomes is that things come in phases, right? Maybe today I won't be able to go play tennis with my friends because I have this paper revisions that are due tonight, right? So it's toggling back and forth and giving yourself grace when you're not able to sort of do everything that you might want to do, or giving yourself grace when you might have to pull out something that you really wanted to do. And I think it's really about being hard on the problems, right? Being hard on sort of the issues, right? But not being hard on yourself, right?
Wow. I have to write that down. I'm going to have to write that down, Simar. I'm going to write that down. And you keep going. This is good.
Yeah, I mean, all that is to say is that, I mean, the work that I do can be quite serious, right? We are dealing with people that are dying, frankly, people who are just don't feel safe in the healthcare system, right? So I try to keep a smile in my face and sort of be happy just more generally, not because it's sort of a farce or this like image I'm trying to portray into the world, but because I don't want to burn myself out, right? I'm dealing with people's stories and I want to maintain them, right, with the respect they deserve, and sort of enjoy life. When I'm not working on my work, I have to be enjoying life for what it is, right? And even enjoying the work that it comes, right? I'm dealing with serious things, but I'm also enjoying the opportunities that I have to spread awareness about this, try to motivate policy change, try to motivate culture change. I think that's a large reason why I do journalism, because it's a powerful way to change culture.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm all about giving people grace and giving yourself grace. That aligns with my faith perspective and faith tradition. Right. But yeah, dude, this is the thing, in a similar way, that's the reason why I've done podcasting. And that's the reason why I've done like science communication, even in some instances, written books and then made them completely free. So yeah, I've written articles, literature reviews that took me a very long time, and then just made it completely free. Now, some may question why make it free. You could charge. That's a different conversation for a different time. But the purpose of all of this has been towards changing the way people perceive chemistry education and chemistry concepts, to make it more accessible, to make the correct insights, the salient information from people like yourself, people like Dr. Langer, people like Dr. Amrian Brown, people who are big players or who will be big players like yourself in the science community, having them share their strategies and insights and methods of processing and methods of decision making and methods of going through transitions in their careers and in their personal life, so that other people can benefit from it. And of course, the metrics do reflect that it's progressively becoming more and more received. But so how do you maintain teamwork and vision in your classroom and in your workspace, in your projects? Do you have collaborators often, or is this primarily the work that you do by yourself?
I mean, everything I do is a team effort, right? There's nothing I do that's on my own, right? And I'll
Are
tell
you,
you
are
what.
you sure? You sure? You seem like you could do it yourself, man.
I don't know. Everything comes down to a team, and I think.
Oh my goodness.
I think like sometimes people ask me, Simar, how do you do all that you do? Because I'm not doing it alone, right? I'm doing it as part of a team. It takes the village, right? And I mean, I'll give you a couple of quick examples, right? In every research, there's not a single research paper I've done where I'm the sole author, right? It's always as part of a team. I'm always leveraging other people's insights. I'm learning from them. Hopefully, they're learning something from me as well, right? It's a shared dialogue. On my journalism, right? I might be the person that's listed on the by Simar Bajaj, but really there's an editor who has been my sounding board, has been editing my piece, thinking through the structure. They're my sources who have informed me. I mean, journalism is really opportunity and humility, right? It's a class in humility, because in every conversation I go to, I'm the least knowledgeable person in the room, right? So it really teaches you how to learn and listen, right? And bring them into the conversation. It's a team effort. It's not just the journalist writing about someone. It's a journalist writing with someone. And I think that's sort of like the teamwork is ultimately essential, because there's only so much I can do. There's only so much that I want to do with my expertise alone, right? There are unique synergies and unique opportunities to partner and make something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. So I think all that is to say is that the teamwork comes in every aspect of my life, and I couldn't be here without sort of like a village, literally a village of people behind me.
That's good. The potentiating aspect of collaboration, or the synergistic aspect of collaboration. That's very, very good, man. That's very good. In that, collaboration. Like I like what you said. You said it's a class act in humility, in that you are speaking with people who have a degree of expertise that you may not have at this time. And that's many times the case with these podcast interviews. Some of the times I've been exposed to some of the material, but these people have a niche expertise. Like you yourself, you have a niche expertise in the work that you do. So yeah, it's definitely a treat and an honor. So why did you choose chemistry and history of science, as well as global health and policy, to focus on undergrad at Harvard? Why did you choose those?
So I started off at Harvard studying history of science and global health and health policy. I think history of science is fundamentally a history of, it's a study of change, right? At the very macro level, that's seeing sort of how trends and have progressed over time, right? How knowledge is produced, right? I think that's a critical question as we consider how to spread knowledge. How is knowledge produced, right? What are sort of the context in which it is produced, shared, distributed? And I think ultimately, this is not just the knowledge that comes to some science that we care about in the present. It's knowledge that exists in its own time, in a whirlpool of its own context. Like alchemy, for example. Alchemy we've never been able to figure out how to make metals into gold, but it's produced such valuable chemistry, right? Now, if you just study alchemy as the production of chemistry, you're missing out a large part of its context. You're missing out sort of the alchemy that doesn't lead to chemistry, but is equally important for understanding its context. So history of science was sort of my opportunity to understand how knowledge is produced and distributed, which I think is incredibly important. Chemistry, I added actually frankly, this semester, this year.
Wow.
Right?
I hope my podcast influenced you.
I'm sure it did. And, I think the reason why was I was talking to an advisor, and he's like, Simar, you're secretly a chemistry major. I told him, no, I'm history of science. He said, Simar, you are 2 to 3 classes away from getting a degree in chemistry. And I was like, I was shocked, and I found out I was secretly a chemistry major, so decided to make it more official. But the way I see chemistry is not that I don't claim to be a chemist, and I think that would be false of me to say. What I claim to be is sort of use it as a way of understanding science. Use it as a way. I like how you framed it at the beginning. Sort of change, right? That's what chemistry ultimately is, right? It is electrons moving between orbitals, right? It is photons coming out.
Okay, let's go to town. Let's go to town. If we can talk about chemistry, let's go to town.
Right. It's change at the micro level in a way that complements very nicely to the change that happens in history at the macro level, right? I think them teach me something profound, that change sort of is frankly possible. The fact that things were so different in the past means that they can be so different in the future. It's a message of hope, even as we face such serious issues as inequity, as we face such serious issues as stigma.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, there's a degree of determinism there. And also, at the same time, as we see with quantum phenomena, there's a degree of indeterminacy, in that just because it occurred in the past doesn't mean it'll necessarily be the case in the future. So that in that indeterminacy, I would say, in my opinion, there's a degree of possibility. So we don't know what the future will bring. So therefore, we can plan and push and persevere for an even better one. Yeah, dude, that's almost like we're rattling around Heisenberg's ideas. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different time. So what has been some of the most beneficial advice you have received as we wrap up?
I mean, it's interesting, and I've been so fortunate to have such great mentors, all of whom have given terrific advice. But the advice that I always think of is sort of a Shakira song, right? A Shakira song.
You like Shakira?
I listen to everything, a little bit of everything.
There's nothing wrong with that. Go ahead, enjoy your life.
The song is try everything, right? And I think this circles back to one of the themes of just our conversation, right? That you have to try everything because not because you're going to do everything, but because you need to sort of understand what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and what sort of you might not be good at, but you're willing to put in the effort because you really like it, right? And sort of all that is to say is that, again, if I never sort of tried journalism, I would have never realized that I love it, and the other fact that I'm semi decent at it, right? And I think that I've tried a bunch of things. I've tried 100 different things, right? I always like to tell friends about the story where freshman year at Harvard, they have a club fair, and I signed up for 20 different clubs, right? And I just actively attending all the clubs, right? And I mean, most people would say that's crazy. I mean, and I do think that's crazy. I don't recommend it, but I think it was important for me in the moment to understand what is valuable for me. What do I want? What do I like? What I don't like? And I think ultimately, when you have sort of that opportunity to reflect, it's powerful.
Yeah, dude, this is good. So, Simar, thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all the best in your studies. I look forward to seeing the Nature and Science papers, and who knows, the Pulitzer Prize that you may win in the future. So take care and all the best.
Welcome to the New Chemists podcast. We are glad you are listening. We are one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the New Chemists podcast, one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We are glad you are listening. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the New Chemist podcast. We are glad you are listening. We are one of the best chemistry podcasts globally. We encourage you to subscribe and continue to listen.
Welcome to the New Chemist podcast.
We are so glad you are listening. Feel free to subscribe on Spotify and tell your friends and colleagues about the podcast.
Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Our Deepest Prayer by Marianne Williams. You are very important, especially to us here at the New Chemist podcasting group. You listening in is significant.
Vous êtes très important, surtout pour nous ici au New Chemist Podcasting Group. Votre écoute est significative.
Usted es muy importante, especialmente para nosotros aquí en The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Usted escuchando, es significativo.
Você é muito importante. Especialmente para nós do The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Você ouvindo, é significativo.
Είστε πολύ σημαντικοί, ειδικά για εμάς εδώ στο The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Το να ακούς είναι σημαντικό.
Sie sind sehr wichtig, besonders für uns hier bei The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Es ist wichtig, dass du zuhörst.
Je bent erg belangrijk, vooral voor ons hier bij The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Dat je meeluistert, is veelbetekenend.
You are very important, especially to us here at the New Chemist Podcasting Group. You listening in is significant. Welcome to the New Chemist Podcast.
Bienvenidos al podcast del nuevo químico.
Καλώς ήρθατε στο podcast του New Chemist. Welkom bij de podcast van The New Chemist.
Bienvenue sur le podcast du nouveau chimiste.
Bem-vindo ao podcast do novo químico.
Welcome to the New Chemist Podcast. Work hard. Be value-driven. You can do it. You can grow and learn it. You can be the difference you and your community needs. Don't give up. We are here, rooting and cheering for you. Don't give up.
Travaillez dur. Soyez axés sur la valeur. Tu peux le faire. Vous pouvez grandir et l'apprendre. Vous pouvez être la différence dont vous et votre communauté avez besoin. N'abandonnez pas. Nous sommes ici pour vous encourager et vous encourager. N'abandonnez pas.
Trabalhar duro. Seja orientado por valores. Você consegue. Você pode crescer e aprender. Você pode ser a diferença que você e sua comunidade precisam. Não desista. Estamos aqui torcendo e torcendo por você. Não desista.
Δούλεψε σκληρά. Να οδηγείτε στην αξία. Μπορείς να το κάνεις. Μπορείτε να μεγαλώσετε και να το μάθετε. Μπορείτε να είστε η διαφορά που χρειάζεστε εσείς και η κοινότητά σας. Μην τα παρατάς. Είμαστε εδώ για να σας ζητοκραυγάσουμε. Μην τα παρατάς.
Trabaja duro. Sea impulsado por el valor. Puedes hacerlo. Puedes crecer y aprenderlo. Usted puede ser la diferencia que usted y su comunidad necesitan. No te rindas, estamos aquí animándote y animándote. No te rindas.
Werk hard. Wees waardegedreven. Je kunt het. Je kunt groeien en leren. U kunt het verschil zijn dat u en uw gemeenschap nodig hebben. Geef niet op. We zijn hier om voor je te roten en te juichen. Geef niet op.
Work hard. Be value-driven. You can do it. You can grow and learn it. You can be the difference you and your community needs. Don't give up. We are here rooting and cheering for you. Don't give up. Thanks for listening. We're glad you were able to tune into this podcast. Once again, this is The New Chemist, where we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as the other sciences, careers, community, research, and COVID-19. Thanks again for listening. Note, the views on this podcast represent those of my guest and I.
In the world of pharmacy, we lay the claim. Knowledge and compassion is the golden flame. Science and practice, side by side they groove. In a student's journey, we find the move.
These views do not reflect the guest or interviewee today. These are solely the views of the original podcast host. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hands the wonders wrought. 2 Corinthians 5:20 We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. With that in mind, if you are curious about the growing success or progress of the podcast host, or any of his guests who are persons of faith, here is an optional open invitation to hear the gospel. In the words of Tim Keller, here is the gospel, quotes this, the gospel is this, we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared believe, yet at the very same time we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we ever dared hope. So if you are interested, feel free to pray this prayer with me. Dear Lord Jesus, I know that I am a sinner, and I ask for your forgiveness. I believe you died for my sins and rose from the dead. I turn from my sins and invite you to come into my heart and life. I want to trust and follow you as my Lord and Savior. In your name. Amen. If you believe that, you are now saved and a child of God. Take care. God bless, and look for Bible-teaching churches or gospel-based churches to grow and develop in Christ.
You are very important, especially to us here at the New Chemist podcasting group. You listening in is significant.
Vous êtes très important, surtout pour nous ici au New Chemist Podcasting Group. Votre écoute est significative.
Usted es muy importante, especialmente para nosotros aquí en The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Usted escuchando, es significativo.
Você é muito importante. Especialmente para nós do The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Você ouvindo, é significativo.
Είστε πολύ σημαντικοί, ειδικά για εμάς εδώ στο The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Το να ακούς είναι σημαντικό.
Sie sind sehr wichtig, besonders für uns hier bei The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Es ist wichtig, dass du zuhörst.
Je bent erg belangrijk, vooral voor ons hier bij The New Chemist Podcasting Group. Dat je meeluistert, is veelbetekenend.
You are very important, especially to us here at the New Chemist Podcasting Group. You listening in is significant.